Welcome back, everybody. I had to start a video with just how filthy I am. Check me out. I am just completely filthified. It looks like I'm bleeding too, but that's just some axle grease. But anyway, what we're doing is I got a set of trailing arms for the Go Kart, the big Go Kart that is, and I was trying to figure out what kind of axles I could put on it. And I said, well, I don't have the budget to buy a whole bunch of new crap anymore. And a lot of guys like to use Mazda Miata axles. Well, I don't have the budget for that. But one is about as strong as a Mazda Miata, and I figured, you know, I got Volkswagen axles all over the place. I got CV joints, I've got bolts, I got everything I need to put it together. I even have drums, so we could very, very easily fit these drums onto here. But I don't need the whole drum because the brake actually lives in the middle of the axle. So what I did was I cut out the drum, I machined this down, so now I have a lightweight 4-lug hub that a wheel can mount to without any issues. It'll go right onto a stock Volkswagen Beetle axle, just like that. Hey, looking pretty familiar. If you've had a Volkswagen, you know. And I love that all this is coming together, because this is probably going to save me like $1,000 in building this go-kart, but the plan is to take this axle and get it to go into this trailing arm. Actually, it needs to go this way. But the problem is the Chinese, you sound terrible. That's his crowing collar. The Chinese bearings are clearly too big on this axle. But this is what I discovered when taking stuff apart. And the specs on this is really hard to find for some reason. I tried looking up the Volkswagen rear bearing specs. The axle bearing fits right over the axle like it's supposed to. The Chinese bearing is exactly the same outer diameter. And it's 1 millimeter thicker than the other bearing, but what that means is that I can get a sealed bearing like this, and it has a number on the side of it. This is actually a Chinese bearing. It came out of that trailing arm here from Volkswagen. I think it says Hung Huai on it. Yeah, Hung Huai. These specs are just impossible to find. I was trying to find a number on a bearing, and I said, well, you know, I have a trailing arm here that's dead. This is the one that Rob crashed and bent it all up. And I said, well, let me extract the bearing and get some measurements off of it. But the magic is this bearing is actually going to fit into this trailing arm, and then the Volkswagen axle is going to fit right into that. The big gotcha is the spacers, again, aren't going to fit. What the hell just fell down? That was my headphones. The spacer that came from the Chinese trailing arm is clearly too big, but the Volkswagen spacer, which is clearly too long, needs to be cut down in length to that long. I'll make that work, and then we'll drop it inside of this trailing arm with a brand new bearing on either side. And this is something else I noticed. I don't know if these guys are talking to each other or what, but this is the axle seal from the Chinese trailing arm, and this is the axle seal from the Volkswagen trailing arm. And they're both exactly the same size inner and outer. So that also means, and I love this, that means I can use either the Chinese seal or a Volkswagen seal, which is probably also made in China. And the Volkswagen axle, which has that little, not a bearing, but it's like a bushing, the seal fits over it. So this is all gonna bolt together. The only gotcha is that axle is gonna be a little bit long when everything's said and done, because this trailing arm isn't nearly as wide. And it does need to be backspaced a little bit because the CV joint is kind of big where it needs to go in here. But if I backspace it about, I think about ½ an inch, I think that'll get it. So that just means add another spacer. The length of this axle is probably going to be a little long coming out that anyway. So I might have to reduce it a little bit more, or maybe go back this way with another spacer. It all depends on where I want my wheel offset to go. So anyway, this is just a quick short for Small Engine Saturday because I didn't get a chance to record any video for what I need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record tomorrow, and that means you'll probably see my Small Engine Saturday or Sunday video on Monday morning. So we'll keep getting this thing going, and I got a feeling Bee will probably be with me too. We haven't had her in a tech video in a while, and we're going to show her how to get an engine started because that's what we're going to work on. We're going to try to get that an engine on the big cart over here. And you guys have seen that, but this is the plan. So for those of you that are going to tell me that it's not going to work, because there's always one of you guys, this I think is actually going to work quite well. Because all these parts just fit together like they're supposed to be together. I mean, what a lucky find. Now the gotcha is, this trailing arm will not bolt directly onto that frame. This is actually one from an upgraded model of that cart, so I'm going to have to weld some tangs onto it to make that work. And then of course I'll have to build a cage for the back that'll hold my sprocket carrier and my disc brake, as well as the 2 CV joint cups, which I'll use from an old Volkswagen transmission. So that should get everything to come together. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, unless the axles were perhaps a little too long. But again, because I get to decide where these arms are going on, I can set the width of these things. So anyway, I'm going to keep slapping parts together on these things here. A lot of this is, well, it was all experimental. I really did not know what I was getting into until you have all the parts laid out on the bench. But now that I'm actually seeing these things, I'm starting to realize that this is going to go together pretty easy. I really like the way that turned out, cutting it down on the lathe. This was, you know, the surprise is, and this is interesting. This drum, you see this this flange on here that's part of this casting? I think these things are cast. I don't think these are machined. I think they machine the inside, and then they machine where the holes get bolted into it, as well as the broaching for the splines on the inside. But this is not round. And that kind of amazed me. When it was in the lathe, this would wobble, this line right here, but the outside of it did not. So the casting was not straight when they made it. Now, I didn't check the label on this casting before I chopped it up. I don't know if it was a proper Volkswagen one or if it was Chinese. It's anybody's guess, but nonetheless, that one is now dead. So we're just going to use the center of it as a hub instead. And that turned out nice. I'll de-rust it, I'll get it painted up, and that should go right on there. And you know, it's not as heavy as you might think it would be, because without all this extra weight on the back side of it, it really reduced it. Now, I'm sure it's a lot heavier than a Go Kart hub would be, but because of what I'm using here, I can mount any set of Volkswagen brakes on the back of this thing that I want to. So that gives me a lot of different brake ideas and things that I can do. Now, I don't need a big heavy brake on it, because again, there's going to be one in the center of the axle, but this Go Kart will be upgraded to a lot more horsepower, and I'm thinking somewhere between 50, 60, 70, maybe even up to 100 horsepower with a motorcycle engine. This thing is going to go fast, and that also means you're going to want to have good brakes. And if you've been watching my videos, you'll know that I like to put good brakes on things before I go any further in any of my projects. So here's where we're starting. We'll get this rear suspension. Nice, guys. Well, you're not on camera, but they're humping. So we'll get these put together, and I'll have the option to, of course, mount any Volkswagen brakes on that I want to. I could even do a Porsche brake upgrade if I want to. I mean, that's also an option. The only gotcha is they are a little heavy. Once you start adding the big rotors on everything on the backside, it's going to change your rolling weight. And one of the things you don't want to increase is your rolling mass, because, you know, it's going to slow down your acceleration, and it's also going to make it harder to stop. But again, with big brakes on a vehicle that only weighs about, I think this thing's coming right around 500 pounds. With the additional brakes and everything else, I mean, I might actually, I'm not going to say up to 100 pounds, but as you remember, you're taking off a bunch of stuff to add a bunch of stuff. So we're not going to gain 100 pounds, but we might gain 30, 40, 50, and I'm just kind of winging it, but that's not that much. And as far as rolling weight is concerned, well, I have the option to even put Volkswagen wheels on here. And I did want some big, chunky mud tires. Something 15-inch would be great. But again, a set of 12s, 13s, 14s would probably be fine too. Being that I don't have to fit a disc over this hub and actually fit a wheel over that, there's no reason I should have to push that any bigger. Well, I guess that's going to be it for today. The chickens already went inside. They realized it's getting dark, so they've already made a run for it. So we've got everything laid out here. I'm going to get the number off of this bearing, and I'm going to get a, I believe it's called a 2RS bearing, whatever the number is on this thing. 62, it's getting a little dark, but I think it says 6268. Don't hold me to it, but 6268-2RS. That means 2 rubber seals, 1 rubber seal on each side. And that means I don't have to put one of these seals on the outside because, well, the bearing's going to be flush with the outside of this trailing arm anyway. But yeah, I see no reason why all this is going to work, or why all this isn't going to work, I should say. So I'm quite happy with that. So we got things to come. Oh, by the way, the idiot company that sent me these, I don't have the other one here right now, but they sent me 2 left side trailing arms. And these are from a a Trailmaster 300, but they sent me 2 lefties. And yes, there is a difference because the shock mount is all inverted, and then there's a link here for the sway bar, also that's inverted, and they're not absolutely symmetrical. So yeah, there is a difference. I contacted their customer support. I don't know if it was somebody just being a dummy, or if somebody was being nefarious and said, yeah, they'll probably never figure it out. They'll just put it on. Well, it won't fit. It's not going to fit. So anyway, I'm fighting with their tech support on that one. I just sent out an email on that yesterday. And I'll start there. Maybe I get an answer on Monday. And if I don't start getting an answer by middle of the week, they're going to get a phone call. And if they don't get a phone call, or if I can't get through to them on the phone call, rather, well, then I'm going to talk to my credit card company. And I'll see if they'll be friendly enough to reverse half of the charge. And then they'll start being motivated to talk to me. Gotta love credit card protection, guys. Don't buy anything from a company that you don't know unless you use a credit card. This is definitely not symmetrical. I can see a lot of different things of how this is cut and laid out. Yeah, it's definitely got it's jogged to one side, so yeah, this is a lefty. This actually would go on the vehicle like that. The shock goes in from the top, sway bar link goes in from the back, and then the axle here goes in like that. Okay, well, I guess that's it for now. Licky, likey, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to pluck the dingle belly so you get updates every time I upload a video. Check out Doug Shit down there for all my different social media links. I'm going to take a bath. I'm filthy, dirty. I've had the lathe throwing all kinds of crap at me, and when I was pulling that bearing, it shot grease all over my face. You'd think that I was dating it, but anyway. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.